The Spitfire touches down at RAF Manston with over 200 bullet and cannon holes punched through its fuselage, wings and tail. The fabric control surfaces are shredded to ribbons, one wing's visibly sagging. Fuel is streaming from ruptured tanks, leaving a dark trail across the tarmac. The cockpit canopy is shattered into jagged fragments, and somehow, impossibly, Flying Officer Robert Doe climbs out of the wreckage, stands on the wing, and walks away without a scratch. 15th of September 1940, the absolute height of the Battle of Britain, and Doe has just flown home an aircraft that every engineering manual says should have disintegrated in mid-air miles ago. He'd been jumped by multiple Messerschmitt 109s over Kent, caught in a murderous crossfire that turned his Spitfire into a flying sieve, and he still managed to shoot down 2 German fighters before coaxing this dying machine back to England. This isn't just another survival story. It's a masterclass in Spitfire engineering, pilot skill under impossible pressure, and the razor-thin margin between life and death at 20,000 feet. How does a man fly home in an aircraft that's already destroyed? Robert Doe wasn't your typical RAF officer. Born in 1920 to a working-class family in Reigate, Surrey, he didn't come from the public school background that dominated Fighter Command's officer ranks. He joined the RAF in 1938 as an aircraftman, essentially enlisted ground crew, because that's what was available to someone without family connections or money for expensive private flying lessons. But Doe could fly. He earned his pilot's wings through the RAF's internal training system, proved himself exceptionally capable, and received a commission as pilot officer in early 1940, an unusual path upward that some snobbish officers quietly looked down on. Doe didn't particularly care what they thought. By July 1940, he's assigned to 234 Squadron, flying Spitfires out of Middle Wallop and St. Evil. The Battle of Britain is beginning in earnest, and Doe proves himself immediately. He's not flashy, doesn't seek glory or make grand speeches, but he's methodical and an absolutely brilliant shot. Whilst other pilots spray bullets hoping for hits, Doe closes to dangerously short range, sometimes inside 200 yards, and makes every 3-second burst count. His first confirmed kill comes on 8 August 1940, a Messerschmitt Bf-110 over the Channel. Then another on 11th August. By early September, he's claimed 5 confirmed kills, officially making him an ace. But Fighter Command doesn't have time for celebrations, because the operational tempo is absolutely crushing. September 1940 is the critical month. The Luftwaffe is launching massive raids against London and southern England, sometimes 300 aircraft or more in a single formation. RAF Fighter Command is stretched desperately thin, scrambling every available pilot multiple times daily. Pilots like Doe are flying 4, sometimes 5 combat sorties per day. You land, refuel and rearm in minutes, then immediately go back up. The exhaustion is crushing. You're watching squadron mates die daily. Replacement pilots arrive with barely adequate training and often die within their first week of combat. Fighter Command records show that by September 1940, pilot fatigue was becoming as dangerous as enemy action itself. Some pilots were literally falling asleep in their cockpits between missions. Others were making elementary errors from sheer exhaustion that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Misjudging distances, forgetting to switch fuel tanks, losing situational awareness. Doe is holding up better than most, his working-class background perhaps giving him more resilience than some of the younger public school boys who'd never faced genuine hardship before enlisting. But everyone has limits, and combat has a way of finding them. On the morning of 15th of September, Doe has already flown 1 sortie. He's grabbed a quick meal, checked over his Spitfire whilst ground crew rearm and refuel it, and he's ready when the scramble bell rings again at 2 in the afternoon. 12 Spitfires from 234 Squadron thunder down the runway at Middle Wallop, climbing hard toward another incoming German raid. Doe has no idea this sortie will push him past every limit he thought he had, or that he's about to discover exactly how much punishment a Spitfire can absorb before it simply stops being an aircraft and becomes a falling collection of bullet-riddled parts. The only question is whether he'll still be alive when he finds out. 15th of September 1940. This date will be remembered as Battle of Britain Day, the moment the Luftwaffe throws everything at London in what they believe will be the knockout blow. Doe doesn't know he's about to participate in the decisive day of the battle. He just knows the scramble bell is ringing and he's running toward his Spitfire. 234 Squadron launches from Middle Wallop at 1400 hours, 12 Spitfires climbing hard through scattered cloud toward an incoming raid. The radio crackles with vectors from ground control. Big formation heading for London. Bombers with fighter escort. Get up there fast. They make contact at 18,000 feet over Kent. Perhaps 20 Dornier Do-17 bombers in tight defensive formation. Maybe 15. Messerschmitt Bf-110 twin-engine fighters as close escort. The Spitfires dive into the attack, breaking up the bomber formation before they can reach their target. Doe picks his target carefully. A Bf-110 on the formation's port side, slightly separated from the main gaggle. He rolls into a diving attack, closes to 200 yards, centers the Messerschmitt perfectly in his reflector gun sight, and fires a 3-second burst. 8 Browning machine guns hammer out 160 rounds per second. The 110's port engine explodes in a brilliant flash, trailing black smoke. The aircraft rolls inverted and spins down trailing flames. Doe's 6th confirmed kill. But the tactical situation is deteriorating rapidly. The bombers are scattering in all directions, which is good. They won't hit their target accurately. The problem is the Messerschmitt Bf-109s arriving from higher altitude. Proper single-seat fighters, faster and more maneuverable than the lumbering 110s, dropping out of the sun in textbook bounces. The dogfight becomes utterly chaotic. Aircraft everywhere, tracer fire cutting bright lines through the sky, pilots screaming warnings over the radio that get lost in the static and overlapping transmissions. Doe spots another 109 lining up on his wingman. He pulls hard left, climbs into position using the Spitfire's superior turning ability, and fires from slightly above and behind. The 109 takes hits across the wing root and fuselage, starts trailing white glycol coolant smoke, breaks off diving eastward. Doe doesn't follow to confirm the kill because his peripheral vision catches movement and his instincts scream danger. His aircraft shudders violently. Cannon shells are ripping through his Spitfire. A Messerschmitt 109. He never saw has bounced him from above and behind, the classic killing position, and is pouring 20mm cannon fire and 7.92mm machine gun rounds into his aircraft at point-blank range. The first shells punch through the rear fuselage just behind the cockpit with sounds like hammers hitting sheet metal. Then his port wing, his tail section. The impacts are deafeningly loud, even over the Merlin engine's roar and the wind noise. His instrument panel explodes in sparks and flying glass fragments. The canopy shatters. Wind screams through the cockpit at nearly 300 miles per hour. He can smell aviation fuel, sweet, sickly, terrifying, which means fuel tanks are holed and he's sitting in a potential fireball. Doe throws the Spitfire into a violent brake turn, jamming the stick hard over, trying desperately to shake the attacker. The German follows, still firing, more impacts hammering through the airframe. His aircraft is being systematically destroyed around him, and he's got seconds to do something, or he's dead. Then a second 109 joins the attack from a different angle. 2 aircraft shooting at him simultaneously from different positions. This is the nightmare scenario every fighter pilot dreads. Caught in a crossfire, whilst you're focused on one threat, the other one kills you. Cannon shells and machine gun rounds are punching through his Spitfire in a catastrophic drumbeat of destruction, and Robert Doe is running out of altitude, airspeed, and options. Cannon shells and machine gun rounds are tearing through Doe's Spitfire at a rate that seems physically impossible. The damage assessment conducted after landing will count 214 separate hits, 127 machine gun bullet holes, and 87 cannon shell impacts. Right now, Doe doesn't know those numbers. He just knows his aircraft is disintegrating beneath him, and he needs to survive the next 30 seconds. His aileron controls have gone mushy, 1 or more control cables severed or badly damaged. The aircraft responds to his stick movements but slowly, like flying through thick mud. His rudder still works properly, which is keeping him vaguely coordinated. The elevator responds when he pulls back, though something's binding and it requires more physical force than normal. The fuel situation is catastrophic. Aviation fuel is flooding the cockpit floor, soaking his boots, and the smell is overwhelming. At least one of his 2 main tanks has been holed badly. Spitfires carry 85 gallons split between upper and lower fuselage tanks. If both are leaking at this rate, he's got minutes of flying time remaining. Maybe 10 minutes, possibly 5. His Rolls-Royce Merlin engine is somehow still running despite taking multiple hits. He heard them impact with distinctive metallic clangs that you feel through the airframe. Temperature and pressure gauges are climbing into dangerous red zones, but haven't reached critical failure yet. If the engine seizes or catches fire, none of the other problems matter because he's finished. Doe throws the Spitfire into a desperate dive, using gravity and what remains of his controls to build speed. The German fighters follow initially, still firing, but he's diving toward the cloud deck at 8,000 feet, and they apparently decide they've killed him. They break off the attack, probably assuming he'll crash within seconds. In the clouds, Doe has perhaps 30 seconds to make the most critical decision of his life: bail out or try to fly this wreck home. Bailing out means parachuting into the English countryside from 8,000 feet. Sounds survivable until you consider he's over Kent, which is a combat zone with aircraft falling everywhere. He could land in the middle of another dogfight or get shot by a German pilot who sees an easy kill. But more critically, he's not certain where he is. If he's over land, he might survive. If he's drifted over the channel during the fight, entirely possible, then he's parachuting into water. The channel in mid-September is perhaps 15 degrees Celsius. Even with his Mae West life jacket, hypothermia will kill him in 20 minutes. Air-sea rescue might find him eventually, but probably won't with a major battle ongoing and rescue resources already overwhelmed. The alternative is trying to fly a virtually destroyed aircraft back to the nearest friendly airfield. In an aircraft leaking fuel catastrophically, with compromised controls that barely respond, and an engine that could quit any second. Doe makes his decision in perhaps 5 seconds. He's flying home. He's not dying in the channel if there's any possibility whatsoever of reaching an airfield. He breaks out of cloud heading northwest, aiming for the coast. The Spitfire is wallowing through the air like a wounded bird trying to stay aloft. Every control input requires genuine physical effort, the damaged cables adding friction and binding. His arms are already burning from the constant strain. The engine temperature gauge is solidly in the red now. He throttles back slightly to reduce heat, which means less power, which means lower airspeed, which means more time exposed in this flying death trap. He's losing altitude despite trying to maintain level flight. The damaged port wing isn't generating proper lift. The airflow's disrupted by holes and torn fabric. He's constantly adjusting trim to keep the aircraft remotely level, but it wants to roll left where the wing's been shot to pieces. The fuel gauge hits empty. Both tanks are dry. He's flying on residual fuel remaining in the lines and carburetor now. The engine could quit literally any second. And then, through his shattered canopy with wind tearing at his face, he sees something that might be salvation, or might be cruel hope. An airfield in the distance. He thinks it's Manston, an emergency landing field with a long runway specifically for damaged aircraft. It's roughly 5 miles ahead. He's got no fuel gauge reading, an engine running on vapors, controls that barely function, and he's losing 100 feet of altitude every minute. Whether he makes it depends on mathematics he can't calculate, and luck he can't control. Doe nurses the dying Spitfire toward Manston, making constant micro-adjustments to keep it airborne. The aircraft wants to roll left continuously where the wing's damaged. He's holding right aileron pressure constantly, his right arm cramping from the sustained force on the control column. The rudder pedals require abnormal pressure because cables are binding where they've been shot through or are rubbing against damaged structure. Every few seconds he's scanning what remains of his instruments, calculating survival odds that keep getting worse. Airspeed holding at 180 miles per hour, slower than normal cruise, but he doesn't dare push the damaged engine harder. Altitude now down to 2,500 feet and dropping steadily despite his efforts. The Spitfire simply won't maintain height with a partially collapsed wing, bullet-riddled control surfaces, and disrupted airflow across every surface. The engine temperature is critically high. He can see vapor streaming from the cowling, coolant leaking from the punctured radiator system. When the coolant runs completely dry, the Merlin will seize within minutes from thermal overload. The oil pressure gauge is also dropping steadily, suggesting his lubrication system is compromised. And the fuel gauge remains on 0, has been for 3 minutes now. He's flying on fumes and absolutely nothing else. Then the engine coughs, misses a beat. The propeller windmills for a heart-stopping moment before the engine catches again and continues running raggedly. Fuel starvation. The engine is sucking the absolute last drops from the system, pulling vapor and air along with microscopic amounts of remaining fuel. Manston is 3 miles ahead. He can see the runway clearly now. It's going to be desperately close. Doe reaches down and manually pumps the landing gear down. The hydraulic system might be damaged, and he's not risking it failing at the critical moment. The gear locks down with reassuring clunks he feels through the airframe. At least, something still works properly. He sets up his approach and immediately realizes landing this aircraft will be extraordinarily difficult. The normal approach speed is about 85 miles per hour, slowing to 75 over the threshold. But he doesn't trust this aircraft to respond properly at low speeds. If he gets too slow and needs to add power to recover, the engine might not respond or might quit entirely. Better to land fast than stall and crash half a mile short. He's coming in at 120 miles per hour, dangerously hot, but it's the only approach speed where he has any control authority remaining. On the ground at Manston, ground crew have spotted this approaching Spitfire, and they're horrified. Even from a distance they can see the damage. Holes everywhere. Fabric control surfaces torn and flapping in the slipstream. The port wing visibly drooping. Fuel streaming behind in a fine mist. They're genuinely expecting to watch it crash on approach. Doe lines up on the runway centerline, fighting the controls every second. The aircraft wants to drop the damaged wing. He's holding full opposite aileron, using rudder to stay aligned with the runway, managing throttle with his left hand, whilst his right hand grips the control column so hard his knuckles are white. The runway threshold passes beneath. He chops throttle completely, pulls back gently on the stick. Can't be too aggressive because the elevator response is unpredictable, and the aircraft might pitch up violently or not respond at all if cables are jammed. The Spitfire settles toward the tarmac, bounces slightly on the main wheels, settles again. Main wheels bite properly into the runway. He holds the tail up as long as possible to maintain directional control with the rudder, then gradually lets the tail wheel drop as speed bleeds off. He's down. The Spitfire rolls perhaps 200 yards before he applies brakes, carefully, because damaged hydraulics might lock one brake and spin him into a ground loop. The aircraft slows, stops on the runway with fuel still streaming from multiple holes, the engine ticking and pinging as it cools down from operating far beyond safe temperatures. Robert Doe sits in the cockpit for a long moment, hands still gripping the controls, breathing hard, before he unbuckles his harness and climbs out onto the wing. Ground crew are sprinting toward the aircraft, fire extinguishers ready in case fuel ignites. They stop dead when they get close enough to see the damage properly. The Spitfire looks like it's been through an industrial shredder. Holes everywhere, control surfaces in tatters, structural damage that should have caused catastrophic failure. One of the fitters just stares and says what everyone's thinking. "How the bloody hell did you fly that thing home?" Doe doesn't have a good answer. He just did what needed doing. Now someone needs to tell him if this aircraft will ever fly again, or if he's just landed a write-off. The ground crew at Manston swarm Doe's Spitfire the moment he shuts down, and what they find is absolutely staggering. They count methodically over the next hour, 127 machine gun bullet holes and 87 cannon shell impacts, 214 hits total punched through the airframe. Some are clean through and throughs, where rounds entered one side and exited the other. Others have fragmented on impact with structure, creating multiple secondary damage points that spiderweb outward. The port wing has 17 separate holes through the main spar. the critical structural member that carries the wing's entire load. Any one of those hits could have caused catastrophic structural failure, folding the wing upward and sending the aircraft into an unrecoverable inverted spin. The wing didn't fold because Supermarine's designers had built in massive safety margins. That famous elliptical wing wasn't just aerodynamically elegant, it was structurally overbuilt, capable of carrying loads far beyond normal flight requirements. Both fuel tanks have been holed multiple times, at least 4 punctures in the upper tank, 3 in the lower. Aviation fuel has been streaming out during the entire flight home, leaving a trail across Kent. Doe flew 40 miles sitting directly above tanks full of bullet holes and fuel vapor, with damaged electrical systems sparking occasionally. One ignition source in the wrong place would have turned the cockpit into a fireball instantly. The control system reveals 6 severed or partially severed cables. The Spitfire uses a complex mixture of cables and push rods to operate control surfaces, deliberate redundancy that saved Doe's life. When one cable was cut, enough others remained to maintain partial control. Some contemporary aircraft designs used single cables for critical systems. One hit and you're completely uncontrollable, spinning toward the ground with no way to recover. Spitfire's designers had anticipated battle damage and designed accordingly. The Merlin engine has taken multiple hits. One cannon shell passed completely through the cowling, missing the engine block by perhaps 3 inches. Several machine gun bullets have struck the engine itself, but apparently hit non-critical components: cooling fins, ancillary equipment, external fittings. The Rolls-Royce Merlin contains over 22,000 individual parts. Hitting certain parts kills the engine instantly. Hitting most parts just damages performance. Doe got extraordinarily, impossibly lucky. Most shocking to the ground crew are the near misses to the cockpit itself. One cannon shell has punched through the fuselage directly behind the pilot's seat. If Doe had been leaning back at that precise moment, it would have killed him instantly. Another shell shattered the canopy inches above his head, showering him with perspex fragments. A machine gun round tore through the instrument panel, destroying his airspeed indicator, but missing his legs by perhaps 6 inches. Multiple rounds have struck the armor plate behind his seat, fulfilling exactly the purpose it was designed for. The official RAF maintenance assessment comes back within hours. Category 3 damage, repairable at depot level, but requiring extensive rebuild. This Spitfire gets sent back to the factory, stripped down to basic structure, rebuilt with new components, and eventually returned to operational service months later. It will fly again, which is more than most aircraft suffering this level of damage can claim. Doe's reaction to surviving this is characteristically understated. He files his standard combat report, noting 2 enemy aircraft destroyed. The Bf-110 confirmed. The smoking Bf-109 claimed as a probable. He describes the damage factually without dramatics. He requests assignment to another aircraft so he can continue flying. No dwelling on the impossibility of what just happened. No trauma or hesitation. Just professional documentation and immediate readiness to return to combat. He's back in the air within 2 days, flying a replacement Spitfire on another combat sortie. This is the grinding, relentless reality of the Battle of Britain. You survive impossible odds one afternoon, and you're expected to do it again the next morning. By the end of September 1940, Doe has 14 confirmed kills, 2 probables, and 6 damaged. He receives the Distinguished Flying Cross, then a bar to his DFC in January 1941. The incident with the shot-up Spitfire doesn't make particular headlines. Dozens of pilots are surviving similarly catastrophic damage during this period. It's almost routine when extraordinary becomes ordinary through sheer repetition. But it remains one of the most remarkable demonstrations of Spitfire survivability and pilot skill under mortal pressure in the entire battle. Doe flew home an aircraft that engineering calculations said should have disintegrated. He made split-second decisions under fire that kept him alive. He landed an unflyable aircraft through pure skill. And then he climbed into another Spitfire and did it all over again, because that's what the battle demanded, and that's what he was willing to give. But how did this actually work? What combination of engineering, skill, and sheer luck kept Robert Doe alive when so many others died in similar circumstances? So how did Robert Doe actually survive this? Let's break down the engineering, the skill, and the brutal honesty about luck that combined to keep him alive when mathematics said he should be dead. First, Spitfire design philosophy. Reginald Mitchell and the Supermarine engineering team designed the Spitfire with combat damage explicitly in mind. The structure was deliberately over-engineered with safety factors built into every load-bearing component. That elliptical wing wasn't just aerodynamically beautiful, it was structurally redundant. You could hole the main spar in multiple places and it would still carry flight loads because of how forces distributed through the entire wing structure rather than concentrating in single failure points. The control system used multiple cables and push rods running in parallel. Sever one cable and others immediately compensated, maintaining control authority. Compare this to the Messerschmitt Bf-109's simpler, lighter control system. More efficient when undamaged, absolutely catastrophic when hit. A single cable failure in a 109 could render the aircraft completely uncontrollable. The Spitfire sacrificed some weight efficiency for combat survivability, and that trade-off saved lives repeatedly. The fuel system incorporated self-sealing tanks, layers of rubber compound that swelled when punctured by bullets, reducing fuel leakage dramatically. Doe's tanks were so badly holed that the sealing couldn't keep pace, but it slowed the leak enough to give him crucial extra minutes of flying time. Early war aircraft lacked this technology. One fuel tank hit, and you were immediately on fire or dead in the air within minutes. Now compare the Spitfire to its primary opponent. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 was faster in a dive, climbed better, and was an excellent aircraft in many respects, but it was more fragile by design. The 109's narrow fuselage and lightweight construction meant less structural redundancy. Hit it hard enough in the right places, and it came apart. The Spitfire's slightly heavier, more robust construction was effectively armor through engineering redundancy. But engineering alone doesn't save you. Doe's decisions mattered critically. He could have bailed out. Most pilots probably would have after taking that level of damage. He calculated the odds rationally under mortal pressure and decided the channel or uncertain terrain below was more dangerous than staying with the damaged aircraft. That's battlefield mathematics done whilst being shot at, weighing certain hypothermia death against possible crash death and choosing the better odds in seconds. His fuel management was brilliant. He throttled back despite having just been in combat, reducing engine strain and fuel consumption. That decision bought him perhaps 3 extra minutes of flying time, exactly the margin between reaching Manston and crashing into fields a mile short of the runway. His landing approach showed exceptional airmanship. Coming in fast and high compensated for degraded control response. Most pilots would have attempted a standard approach and stalled when the damaged aircraft didn't respond properly at low speeds. Doe adapted his technique to match the aircraft's actual condition rather than trying to fly it by the book. But let's be absolutely, brutally honest. Luck played an enormous role. The cannon shells that missed his engine block by 3 inches. Pure luck. The shell that passed behind his seat when he happened to be leaning forward checking instruments. Luck. The fact that none of the 214 hits struck his propeller hub or severed critical engine components. Luck. The Germans breaking off their attack instead of following him down to confirm the kill. Luck. During the Battle of Britain, Fighter Command lost 1,023 aircraft, destroyed between July and October 1940. Many pilots died in circumstances almost identical to Doe's, but with marginally worse luck. One more critical system hit, one more control cable severed, one shell in the cockpit instead of behind it. The line between Doe's survival and their deaths was measured in inches and fractions of seconds. Modern engineering analysis of the damage photographs confirms that Doe's Spitfire was operating beyond its theoretical survivability threshold. The accumulated damage should have produced catastrophic structural or systems failure. It didn't because multiple systems had to fail simultaneously for complete loss of control, and just barely enough remained functional. He was flying at the absolute edge of possible. The psychology matters too. Doe didn't panic when his aircraft was disintegrating. Panic kills pilots faster than enemy bullets because it destroys rational decision-making. He maintained mental clarity, made logical choices, and executed them calmly whilst his world was exploding. That's not purely training. That's inherent temperament under mortal stress that some people possess and others simply don't. Robert Doe survived because Spitfire engineering gave him a chance. His skill maximized that chance, and luck didn't kill him in the 1,000 ways it easily could have. Remove any single factor, and he dies over Kent in September 1940. Just another casualty statistic in a battle that was consuming pilots at an unsustainable rate. Robert Doe continues flying combat operations throughout the remainder of the Battle of Britain. By the time the battle is officially considered over in late October 1940, he's credited with 14 confirmed kills, 2 probables, and 6 damaged enemy aircraft. He receives the Distinguished Flying Cross in September 1940, the bar to his DFC in January 1941, and eventually the Distinguished Service Order, a remarkable record for a pilot who started the war as enlisted ground crew with no advantages beyond skill and determination. The truly extraordinary part isn't just his combat score, it's that he survives at all. The Battle of Britain consumes pilots at a horrific rate. Of roughly 3,000 aircrew who participate in the battle, 544 are killed and hundreds more are severely wounded or psychologically shattered. The average life expectancy for a fighter pilot during the height of the battle is measured in weeks. Doe flies through the entire brutal summer and autumn of 1940 and keeps going, which puts him in a tiny minority of survivors. He continues operational flying through 1941, eventually rising to squadron leader, commanding his own fighter squadron. He survives encounters that kill more experienced pilots, accumulates battle damage that destroys lesser aircraft, and apparently never loses the ice-cold temperament that saved him in September 1940. By the time he's rested from frontline combat operations in late 1941, he's one of Fighter Command's most successful and experienced survivors, a genuinely rare commodity. Doe serves throughout the remainder of the war in various training and staff positions, passing his hard-won tactical knowledge to new generations of pilots. He survives the entire conflict, extraordinarily rare for someone who fought from 1940 onward in fighters, and leaves the RAF after the war ends in 1945. Post-war, Doe largely vanishes from public view. No memoirs published, very few interviews granted, no celebrity fighter ace lifestyle. He works in civil aviation and various business roles, lives quietly in Surrey, and apparently has absolutely no interest in dwelling publicly on his wartime service. The few times he discusses the September 1940 incident in later years, his description remains characteristically understated. The aircraft was damaged, he flew it home, ground crew repaired it. Just another day's work during a period when impossible things happened routinely. That particular Spitfire, after extensive depot-level repairs and rebuild, returns to operational service and survives the war. It's eventually scrapped during post-war drawdowns, a fate shared by thousands of veteran aircraft. Nobody thought to preserve it because extraordinary machines were commonplace in a conflict that produced extraordinary events daily. No plaques mark its service. No museum displays its bullet-riddled panels. It simply ceased to exist, metal recycled for peacetime purposes. Robert Doe dies in 2010 at age 89, one of the last surviving Battle of Britain aces. His obituaries note his remarkable 14-kill combat record and his survival of the war. The September 1940 incident is mentioned, but isn't considered his defining moment. He accumulated too many others for any single event to dominate his story. This incident exemplifies the Battle of Britain experience perfectly. Ordinary men performing extraordinary actions repeatedly until the extraordinary becomes routine background noise. Doe wasn't superhuman. He was skilled, superbly trained, exceptionally lucky on one particular afternoon, and flying an aircraft designed by engineers who understood that bringing pilots home alive mattered as much as shooting enemies down. The Spitfire's ability to absorb this catastrophic punishment and remain flyable wasn't accidental. It was deliberate design philosophy, prioritizing survivability. Reginald Mitchell died in 1937 and never saw the Battle of Britain, but his engineering decisions saved hundreds of pilots, including Robert Doe, that desperate summer. This story matters because thousands of pilots faced similar situations and didn't survive. For every Doe who flew home in a riddled aircraft, there were others whose aircraft suffered one additional critical hit and disintegrated, whose engines seized 1 mile short of safety, whose luck ran out in ways Doe's didn't. His survival is remarkable precisely because death was the statistically expected outcome. Robert Doe flew home an aircraft that shouldn't have been flyable, made decisions under fire that kept him alive, landed through pure skill, and walked away to fight again the next day. Then he repeated it throughout the battle until Britain won. That's not just one pilot's miraculous survival. It's the story of how Britain survived 1940 itself, one impossible flight at a time, one determined pilot refusing to quit, one brilliant aircraft design proving its worth in the hardest test imaginable. The Battle of Britain was won by men like Doe, flying machines like that shot-up Spitfire, choosing to keep fighting when every logical calculation said they should already be dead.